Those of you who have been disowned, what was your side of the story? My mom decided when I was 13, 14 that she didn't want to have kids anymore. Her and my dad divorced, so my dad moved out of the family house and my mom was newly single. So she gets my sister out first by asking my sister to go away to stay with her dad for the weekend. When my sister came back, my mom had packed all of her items in boxes and said, find somewhere else to live. Sister was maybe 15. Her reasoning is she didn't like the crowd my sister was running with. With me, I stuck around longer. I took more abuse and neglect. My mom didn't cook or clean or have food in the house. And despite getting child support, if I asked for shoes or anything, ask your father, don't ask me. Despite not having food or money, she wouldn't give me the alarm code to the house or a key. I could only come home if she was home. One day, she agreed to drive my friends and I to the movies. Well, her and I got into a small argument about something in the morning. I don't remember what. And I left and arrived home in the afternoon. She was home but wouldn't let me in. I was a 13 or 14-year-old kid before cell phones were that commonplace. Ringing the bell, peering in the windows, she wouldn't let me in. Finally, I found an open window and climbed through, and she just coldly looked at me and said, I could have you arrested for breaking into the house if I wanted to. I went to live with my dad shortly thereafter. She moved away to live with a guy she met from the internet, sponsored him to come into the country with his 12-year-old son. By the time I was 16, she was married and moved the guy in and bought his new son video games, travel allowance, his own apartment when he was a teenager, and wouldn't even buy me shoes. Well, she gave this guy access to her bank account and he took all her money, her entire life savings, all her money in the world. She lost her house and became homeless. My sister took her in at the time. My mom eventually got back on her feet a little bit and got a job. I tried to repair the relationship and be nice, never for long. Finally, she had some kind of mental breakdown a few years ago when I was in my early 30s. I called my office demanding I help her. Something happened at work where her mental health went sideways and she started behaving very erratically. For some reason, when she called my colleague speaking nonsensically and rambling about me, my colleague decided to give her my number to take it up with me myself. My colleague said she felt bad afterwards. So I tried to help my mom and spent all this time talking to her boss, her union rep, her neighbors, her doctor, trying to help her. And she just kept going crazy and being abusive, not willing to accept my help. I washed my hands of her, so she disowned me when she got a better family, and then I tried to help her, but she tried to take me down with her. Okay, I feel this is a perfect encapsulation of the working of karma. Your mother deliberately hastened her own ruin with her very rotten attitude. Story 2. I was disowned, but probably by my own choice. My father died when I was 18. I gave up college to look after him and drive him to hospital every other day for tests. He went to hypno sessions. I would sit for hours waiting for him. I did it all. My brother was never to be seen. He was away living his life. Mother was a heavy drinker. I still lived at home and my brother didn't. I was left to put up with drunk cruelty from my mom losing her husband of 30 years. I looked like the double of my dad, so for some reason she just took it out on me. Or this is what people told me. Changed locks on me after coming home from work all the time and I was stuck. Claimed I was stealing from her, telling everyone lies about me. It was horrible. Nightly shouting at me, accusing me of nonsense while drunk. I tried to help, but she didn't want to know. She used to call the police on me, claiming all sorts of things. They would turn up seeing my mom being drunk and me in my room chilling and telling her off. She was very toxic. My brother wasn't interested. He was 4 years older than me and just didn't care and never visited me or my mom. I begged for help and he was just a coward. One day, a friend had a room come up for rent, so I packed stuff and just left. She was shocked and surprised, but it was the best thing. I used to try to keep in touch, but just got BS. Drunken phone calls and threats. I was 21 at this point and was expecting a child with my partner, so I decided I had had enough. I cut all ties. Cue my brother, realizing my mom had lots of money from my dad's retirement and life insurance, becomes my mom's best friend. She buys him everything, effectively making a deal with the devil, and is scared to talk to me in case she finds out. Long story short, years later, turns out my mom had throat cancer he just didn't tell me about until she choked and died suddenly one day. And I got left a voicemail telling me as much, attended the funeral through gritted teeth. And then I found out I was nowhere on the will, and my brother got a lot, a substantial amount, and I never heard from him again to this day. It's been 5 years since my mom died and he just vanished. I was told I could fight it, but that wasn't me. That was never about money, unlike my brother. And I live hoping he comes knocking one day and needs a kidney so I can tell him to go away, kindly at least. Family and money is a horrible situation, and I live daily thinking I did something wrong and I can't put my finger on what it was to be treated this way, and it haunts me and has left me with many issues. The wrong family member died first. My dad was a gentleman and looking back, put up with horrible cruelty from my mom. I was like my dad, and my brother was like my mom. Story 3. Wow. So, where to begin? My family is very traditional, even for our culture's standards. I grew up thinking that my family was Americanized and that the women in my family were shattering the glass ceiling and things couldn't get any better because we were allowed to wear pants, were required to finish high school, allowed to go to college if we had the money ourselves, and we weren't sold off from marriage. My generation even grew up being called and thinking of ourselves as liberated because we had options beyond being housewives. Even though I saw all these things as amazing freedoms thanks to living an American life, I still wanted more. I wanted to be able to leave the house on my own. I wanted to hang out with my friends. I wanted to question things. I wanted to move away, live and work wherever I wanted, and I wanted privacy, even if it was just a lock on a door. So I was a quote unquote difficult child, as my family put it, and that turned into being a rebellious teen, especially when I started seeing a lot of the other freedoms the other girls at my school had. When I turned 18, I was kicked out, and by 19, I had met my husband, and my family didn't approve. They eventually told me that I can either be allowed back into the family or I can be with him and get disowned. So I chose him and ended up moving across the country without anyone knowing. I didn't hear from my family except my grandma for about 2 years. Then a family friend I kept in touch with ended up telling my family that my life was going really well. My mom started to contact me when she heard, but it took over 6 years for the rest of my family to even acknowledge that I was even alive. It wasn't until my husband and I hit our 9th year anniversary and my family saw what my husband's competition was, then they started to treat us like people and wanted to start talking to us and building relationships with us. I keep in touch with a few of my family members, but I keep them at arm's length. I gave up the possibility of any meaningful family bonds a long time ago, and the communication now is mostly surface level cordialness. Story 4. Mother wanted me to never really fully leave the nest. Like, you can move out, but don't be further than 30 minutes away and spend as much of your time at my place as possible for whatever help I need with the office, the house, or just be my person, son, best friend, confidant, sounding board, whatever I need. Do this from now until I die, whenever that is. My mother and I are also black, and my mother is a textbook example of how racism is a two-way street that she is. She would only truly accept a black woman as my wife and mother of my kids if she had to share me at all. That is, obviously, she'd prefer not to. This way, she could have a fully intact black family unit to belong to, and she could put all of us to work at her law office as well. Also, she assumed we'd graciously let her move in with us when she's too old to take care of herself. All of this is how real black families act because something family is all we've got. I, realizing the trap, immigrated to Europe, something I talked about for years. This was never supposed to happen because the only way he's going to Europe is if I buy his ticket, and I'm never buying his ticket, so that's that. I was supposed to one day wake up or let it go or what have you and take my rightful place with the family, just kind of do the noble thing and surrender my entire future in the name of being the best son I could be. I was financially dependent on her at the time, but I had a friend living in Germany who had immigrated from Chelyabinsk, Russia a few years prior. She bought me my plane ticket and I had squirreled enough money away for my passport. So not only did I loophole my way out of servitude, the fact that a white woman helped me do it burned her even worse. Last thing I heard from my mother was, "Have fun with your white witch, don't ask me for money ever again." Flew to Europe on December 3rd, 2014. Wow. Now the question is, if others in his family inherited her views on family too, does he have siblings who filled his spot? Because if a sibling was forced to replace him, that would be pretty messed up. Hopefully not. Luckily, I don't have to force you to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel because it really does help me out and it would be super if you did that. Let's go ahead and get back to the stories. Story 5. Where do I start? My mother and I have never gotten along. As a child, she's been overly critical of me, Asian parent. Even when I was small, I remember her telling my dad, if she can't even cut in a straight line, what can she even do? I was 5 when she said that. When she realized that I was not going to grow up like she did or have the interests she wanted me to have, she grew more critical of me. She laid off a bit when my little sister came around and she favored her more. I always felt like I was never enough in her eyes. She only was affectionate during family get-togethers, vacations, or sometimes in public. When I came out of the closet, she didn't believe me. She always said lightheartedly that she would love me no matter what, but when push came to shove, my bi-ness was just a phase. We then went to church for the next few months afterwards. I was Catholic. When I hit depression in my teens, each time she picked me up from therapy, she always kept asking, when am I going to be okay? Or hinting how much my sessions are while on antidepressants. She then cheated on my dad when I was around 18. When I had my son, she came to be supportive after the birth, but ended up criticizing how dirty my place was, my parenting, and subtly hinting at calling CPS. Postpartum hit hard and a failed life attempt ensued. What broke the camel's back was when I was visiting family and her mother's partner kept on making me uncomfortable, kept trying to don my child with a certain political hat and took video of her saying political stuff I was not okay with. Kept saying I was uncomfortable, but I was told, you need to take the stick out of your behind or you need to learn to take a joke. The behavior still continued. Then a big confrontation happened and she denied everything about my childhood. My mother said she can't control her partner, he does what he wants despite us telling her it's not okay. She then stated and begged for me to get help. I mentally broke. I'm in therapy now, but right now I don't know if I can take it if something like this happens again. I'm just thankful for my support system now. I'm probably missing some stuff, but at this moment I'm thankful for who I have in my life and that I'm alive. Story 6. My husband and I had to do the disowning. We met in church when he was 19 and I was 21 and immediately knew that we had found the one. So our relationship went really quickly and we were engaged after 3 months. My family was very happy, if a little shocked, and his family acted supportive in the beginning. However, his mother had always had full control of his life. She took all the money from his job, wouldn't let him have friends, insisted on homeschooling him but wouldn't graduate him from high school and had full reign over his schedule. Enter me, fresh from college and living on my own in LA. I encouraged him to stand up to her and learn to say no, and I told him that I wouldn't get married unless he got his GED or whatever would get him out of homeschooling, and started keeping the money he was earning from work. After that, I told him that I would be supportive of him as he figured out what he wanted to do since he had never been given that option before. When he told his mom his plans, she tried everything to talk him out of it and even pulled me aside to try to get me to talk him out of it. I told her that he was a grown man and could do what he thought best. My refusal to bend to her will infuriated her, and after that day, she started to slander my name and reputation within our church and to her family. Even though none of them knew me, everyone objected to him marrying me. She eventually kicked him out of the house with no money, and none of his family would take him. He slept in his truck for months and finally moved in with my family. Because of all of this, we moved our wedding up and got married 7 months after we met. Even though we didn't want them to come, we invited his parents because we wanted to be respectful and hoped to put everything behind us. They came, but hardly anyone else from my husband's side did. Upon getting back from our honeymoon, we found out that the church my husband had grown up in, the church we met in, split, and an associate pastor, a deacon, the worship leader, and a number of the congregation left because my husband's mom had told them all that we moved up the wedding because I got pregnant, and that the senior pastor of the church knew about it and covered it up. This also meant we were cut off by a number of my husband's extended family. So we decided to completely disown my mother-in-law for lying and my father-in-law for standing by and doing nothing. We stopped talking to anyone who believed or defended her as well. Even when there was no baby later that year, she told people I miscarried or terminated and they still believed her. We're celebrating our 11th anniversary this month and we haven't spoken to her since our wedding day. Over the years, some people have come and apologized, admitting that they were wrong, but we still don't speak to most. It was a horrible time, but it forged our marriage in fire, and every anniversary we celebrate is a silent, I told you so, to everyone who tried to keep us apart. Damn, I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty sure if this was made into a series, it would also be a pretty good one to keep watching and binge on during a weekend. Story 7. Emotionally distant, codependent mother, cruel, narcissistic father. I put up with decades of that and landed me with a whole host of psychological issues. At one point, my father refused to speak to me for 3 months because I wouldn't babysit his mistress's kid while he took her to the hospital for a mild fever. He'd been lying to me about who she was and how they met, but I figured it out because, well, I'm not stupid. And you know what? I would probably have continued to accept that treatment because I was so beaten down by that point that I thought it was okay. But then my first kid was born. The birth was rough and I almost lost the kiddo. I was told he could be severely disabled, unable to walk, talk, or eat, and that I wouldn't have a good idea what his life would be like until he was at least 1. No help while he was in the NICU. He turned out to be fine that way, but we dealt with some health issues that led him to nurse 20 minutes out of every hour around the clock for months on end. Then we got that sorted out, and all of us caught the cold from hell, back to not sleeping, told my mom, and her response was verbatim, glad I'm not there. So, for some context, my parents lived nearby, the closest out of any relatives, but saw him maybe 5 times in his first 10 months of life. My father had never held the little guy. Whenever they heard about another family seeing him, they'd complain that it was unfair. I told them if they wanted to see him, all they had to do was text me and I'd do everything else. They told me they shouldn't have to. They babysat once so I could go to a wedding and complained about it for months afterwards. It's safe to say they weren't involved. I told her it wasn't funny and she told me I didn't get the joke. I told her that it might be funny if she was the slightest bit involved or helpful, but with her being as hands-off as she was, it was just cruel. She doubled down and I went off on her, told her that her mother would be disgusted with her if she could see how she was treating me and my kid. Father texted me later, we talked it out, he said he understood and all was good, just leave my mom alone until she's ready to talk again. Except it wasn't all good. A month later, out of the blue, my husband gets a text message from my father telling him that I'm off my meds, behaving erratically and aggressively, and that I'm a danger to our kid. That was news to both of us. We were on our way home from a Christmas party. That was the moment I decided I was done. I couldn't have my kid growing up in a family where it's okay to treat people that way. I didn't want him around those people. I've been no contact since November 2019, and the years since have been the happiest years of my life. I've got 2 amazing boys, one of whom has never met my parents, and I feel great about my decision. Oh, but if you ask them, I was mad because they wouldn't give me money and I wanted them to babysit every week. Entitled millennials, you know? Story 8. I disowned my own family. My sister and sister-in-law hate each other. We were both in my SIL's wedding party, and I did a lot for my brother and my SIL. They had a huge, expensive wedding they couldn't afford. So to help out, I bought diapers, formula, clothes, baby food for my nephew so they could have their own dream wedding. My sister didn't help one bit. We were told we would be third in line at the wedding. We ended up being the last, 6th in line, and my sister and her husband were before us. None of the wedding party helped the way we did or lifted a finger when it came to my nephew. I was off work due to the pandemic, and while she was on maternity leave, I came over every day and spent 7 hours a day for 6 weeks with my nephew so she could get some sleep. Never a thank you for that or everything we bought him. It was a slap in the face, and I cut my entire family off after this. Most agreed we shouldn't complain about the lineup, but I was truly hurt. My SIL said we are ungrateful they allowed us to be in the wedding, but we spent roughly $800 on formula, diapers, food, and clothes for my nephew, so they didn't have to worry about that part of finances while planning their wedding. We also spent $800 each, my husband and I, for my dress, his tux, hotel, shuttle, etc. I've not spoken to my family in 7 months, and it has been the best 7 months of my life. I completely see where I stand and how they use me. We also have 2 boys of our own. They didn't go without, and we didn't suffer helping them, but they never appreciated a goddamn thing we did. So that was one hell of a read about families disowning their own families, huh? I hope you enjoyed the video regardless, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you're also going to enjoy Don't Burn Bridges. What bridge were you happy to burn down? The guy in Story 5 didn't just burn the bridge, he probably burned down the entire city. I'll see you in that video, and thank you for watching this one.